Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of In Our Time. Last week we had a very interesting guest, our Prime Ministerial candidate, Moses Nagamoto, and we intend to have just that kind of discussion this week. We have a very special guest with us, youth by any measure. We have Mr. Norwell Hines with us, and we're going to be talking about all things coalition politics. We have our usual panelists, the one and only James Bond. We have also Essie, you all know her face by now, and we have Nessa to my immediate right. And again, we have a very, very special guest with us. I've known Norwell a very long time, perhaps not long enough. Uh, and he has had tremendous experience internationally working with youth and on some very substantive youth issues. Norwell, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Uh, do you think our young people are going to come out to vote this year? Should they vote this year? And how do we engage our young people meaningfully?
Well, first of all, in terms of international experience and so on, what I would say is that I've had the opportunity as a young person, I think, to visit other countries in the Caribbean and other places. And I think that one thing that strikes me that is true for young people everywhere is that young people are dynamic. Young people have vision. They have a vision of their own life, the vision of the future they want to see. And that is the truth also for Guyanese youth. And when we talk about the elections this time around, May 11, I think that the priority, the main issue that confronts young people is how do we express our vision for the future within the current discourse, the national discourse. And elections is the opportunity to do that in any society, in modern societies, in modern democracies. Guyana, of course, being still a country that is working towards that promise of democracy in the true sense of democracy. And I think that when we talk about young people voting and whether we should vote and how do we engage young people, it's about honoring that vision, honoring the passion and dynamism of young people, and bringing it directly into the discourse as to where the society goes. And yes, young people are going to vote. I feel they are going to vote largely. In this election, over 55% of the electorate is young. A lot of them actually born in the time of the current government. And I think that that's also significant for the elections of this year.
Awesome. Essie looks like she has a question she wants to jump in there.
You're talking about your international experience. How can you bring some of that experience here and invite our young people to come out and vote on polling day, 11th of May?
Well, I don't know so much. When I said international experience, what I was attempting to say really was that I think that that I've been fortunate as a young person involved in community work and with support of many people to engage young people in other societies and to share our common vision. I think a global sense of change is apparent when we talk about young people. I don't know if it is for me to bring international experience necessarily, but what I do know is that it is for all of us as major players and stakeholders within the discourse to begin to ask ourselves, how do we contribute our talents, our excellences, and our skills towards the society we want to see? And I think that we cannot discount the fact that it is action, individual action, that moves societies and that creates change. Change is not an esoteric thing that is just plucked out of the air. Change is something that has to come from work, and it has to come from a vision and a sense of what it is that you want in your society. And I think that is where we are, and that is where young people have to begin to engage within the society and say, well, listen, this is what we want. This is the society we want. We want to be able to, for some young people, party on Friday nights and go to a decent paying job on Monday. And that is the reality for many young people.
That kind of preempts my other question. You mentioned discourse. What are young people talking about? I know you have your ear to the pulse What are young people talking about, or what should they be talking about?
When I put my ear to the pulse and hear so what I think that what I would say is that there is a sense among young people of urgency in this election. There's a sense that um, we have to say what it is that we want as a society. Um, Many of the young people that are coming into the election, first-time voters, um, have really the same issues. When we started the conversation even before the show started, we were talking about sort of people becoming conscious of their own circumstances, their individual circumstances, and taking responsibility for addressing their individual challenges. That means that as a young person, even if you're not so young, you know, that the responsibility to identify what are those major issues within your society, within your community, within your home that needs addressing. You know, simple things like water, potholes, street lights, the things that confront you in your daily life. I think that there is a sense within the society that something has gone wrong. Because truly, we know at a deep level already what is right. And it is to, I think, agitate and to sort of engender within young people that sense of urgency. And I think that sense of urgency is already there. And you see it, it's there, it's on Facebook, people talking on Twitter, people talking all over the day. There is a sense that we have to do something. And it doesn't matter where people decide to vote necessarily, but you vote with the conviction and the passion of your circumstance. And when you examine where you are, you say, well, what do I need to do to get me to where I envision myself, my community, my home, my family?
Awesome. But I'm happy you talked about circumstance because I want to pull in James a little bit here. We learned from the news during the course of the week that the government will be distributing 6,000 solar panels. 23 years later, lots of the riverine communities are still without power. How do we change that kind of circumstance going forward and in a meaningful way? I think the estimates are that one of these solar panels can only light one light bulb and for a certain amount of hours. And some of the complaints have been that the students in these areas can't really use them to do homework and those kinds of things, can't use them to power a laptop. How can we engage our young people around their circumstance, as Norwell said? And Norwell, you can jump in here too.
Well, I've had the privilege of traveling the length and breadth of Guyana. And I could tell you of those solar panels on truly roofs. As we were traveling the Rupuluni a few mornings ago. I want to say emphatically the government has no plan for the rural and hinterland youth. I use the comparison. We went from Brazil, persons who've been to Lethem and drove over to Brazil could tell you, in the state of Roraima, right next door, you find multi-purpose centers where you just drive over, you see stadiums. In Lethem, the roads are different. So you go to your smooth roads. You left Lethem with its critters, poor conditions. The roads are not, the house is not properly laid out. And you drive over and you see these housing schemes are well laid out, well roads. There's a terminal you have to enter, and it's so orderly, it's so clean. There are stadiums, about 5 stadiums, and you wonder, but it does a lack of vision on the part of the People's Progressive Party Civic. Now, to elevate the hinterland and rural youth, you can't give him a fish. The Amerindian people, they are one of the most ingenious persons on the face of the earth. Their lifestyle is catered to maintaining, sustaining, and using their natural resources around them to create a lifestyle that is unique to them and them only. And the thing is, you need to harness that. For example, we have we were hearing talks of the rice farms in Rupuluni area. We were hearing talks of exploiting the peanut because the soil is very good there. We were hearing about cattle. I think the foot and mouth disease had a hit on that. But the thing is, there is so much potential in the area but the government lacks the vision to exploit it, to create jobs for young people, to create facilities for better education for young people. And it's a vision that only a change in the coalition could bring. Our leader, David Arthur Granger, and our team, we have said it. We will create centers in these areas to study what produce we could produce. And I must say this, as you all know, Brazil needs food. Brazil, we could survive by just supplying food to South American countries, by supplying food to Caribbean countries. We could survive and have a very productive country. We could have a strong economy just by supplying food. And the land is there, the people are there, the genius is there with the Armenian people, but we have a government that does not believe in teaching people to fish. They want to keep giving us handouts, and I think it's time we refuse that.
Awesome. I want us to take a break at this point, and we're going to come back in a couple of minutes to In Our Time, and we're going to be picking up on the potential of our young people, and we're going to be pulling Nessa into our conversation a little bit. Thank you.
I am excited about the future for my country. I'm happy to see that we can set aside our differences, set aside the past, and work together for a better Guyana. Let's move forward together. I am excited about the future for my country.
Vote APNU AFC.
We have started a movement of what they call ECIS, every child in school. And I went to the Glory Light Tabernacle last August the 1st, and they said, adopt that slogan. Every 31st of July, give an account. I went to Buxton Line Top. Dion would remember. Not an exciting presentation, not an inspiring presentation. But they say 1st of August is African New Year's Day. I said 365 days from now, ask yourselves whether there were any children out of school in your street and whether you were able to help that child to get to school. Give those child shoes or uniform. Give that child breakfast. Help that child with transport, or buy a school book for that child to make sure that child gets to school. ECIS, every child in school. So we can solve these problems. International Year for People of African Descent wouldn't solve the problem of the child next door who can't get to school. And cash grant wouldn't solve the problem either. You get $10,000. Today is what? 24th? Wouldn't meet February. Tomorrow I'm going to Pomeroon. And there are people in the Pomeroon who spend $5,000 a week to get their child to the charity secondary school. Keep the $10,000, buy a school boat. And that school boat will take the children up and down the Pomeroon, whole year. The children on the highway can't afford to go to school at Suesdike. There are people even living in Campbellville, can't go to Graham's Hall. They go to school 2 days a week because they can't afford the minibus fare 5 days a week.
Your children go to school every day.
Oh man, when I don't talk, you can talk. That's right. Talk, you talk. All I'm saying, we have to accept the responsibility for our children. But the point is, we have to accept responsibility. When you bring that child into the world, you have to ensure that that child not only receives care and food and clothing, but that child could get to school, that child could graduate.
This is our time.
Hi there, and welcome back to In Our Time. We're chatting with our pal Norwell Hines, and we're talking about all things youth and all things campaign 2015. And we were talking about young people involvement, the potential of our young people. And we were going to ask Norwell what role should our young people be playing in the upcoming campaign? We know that the partnership is launching their campaign on March 4th. So what do you expect to see from our young people as part of the campaign?
Well, I think what role young people should play, that's probably an easy question, a major one. I prefer to ask the question and answer the question, should young people play a major role in the elections, in the campaign period? And I would use myself as an example, really. And actually, just before the break, we started to talk about the 6,000 laptops and so on. And okay, governments are going to do what they're going to do, political parties do what they have to do, politicking. But I also want to focus, for example, in Amerindian communities on the story of John Adams and the story of the Tashau in Makamaka. Because those are important stories for answering that question, should young people be involved? The sense of urgency we spoke about earlier is an urgency because your self-interest, when you define your self-interest in terms of your values, in terms of your vision for the kind of society that you want to see, when you feel that your self-interest is under attack, is threatened, then you begin to take bold steps and actions that represent your ideals and your ideas for the future. So should young people be involved in the elections? Yes, because it is the only platform through which you can begin to express in creative, innovative ways your vision for the society you want, our vision for the society we want. At what levels do you get involved? There are various levels. Well, if you get a car, you're lucky, young, you got a car, join a carpool. Make sure people are getting to their places where they have to, the polling stations. If you got money, you got to name your name. You can be an anonymous donor, go on the website, make a donation. If you could go in the office and volunteer your time, volunteer your time. You can call up 5 people, 10 people. You register, you get all the documents. When you need help, you need help. What about the party scrutineers that are there at the polling station that need food? And carry 2 boxes of food for them. So, the sense of urgency, I'm saying, must be in your own defense. We must begin to see our participation in the election process as in our own defense, because we are inheritors, really, of the society that we're creating. It's an interesting dynamic where you are part of a society, creating it, but you're also inheriting it. And therefore, it means that you have a vested interest. And when we talk about democracy, when we talk about meaningful youth participation, I like to say that there are certain principles that underlie meaningful participation. One of those principles is a fair share. When we talk about a fair share, we talk about if young people comprise the largest cohort, then we should have the greatest say within the political party itself and also within the national discourse. We should have the largest say. What I have to say as a young person within the collective cohort we call youth should be more important than what someone outside of that cohort has to say. Because I am the majority, and that's fair share. It's also the democratic principle where individual interests are represented through electoral systems. And I think that this is the frame that I approach it, and this is my own entry into the political discourse at this point in time. It's about answering the question for myself, do I see my interests and vision being represented? And if not, how do I get my interests and vision represented? And where do I agitate? How do I agitate? For whom do I agitate? And ultimately, that leads to the question we vote for.
Yeah, but I want to come and talk about that a little later on, who you're going to vote for. But I want to pull in everybody in the discussion. You were talking about representation and about youth forming the larger part of the population and the voting population. But we don't have a youth policy. We were talking about that during the break, and I think there was a question somewhere about youth policy.
Yeah, I have one. So, Norwell, after 22 years, I'm not aware of any youth policy or manifesto. I want to know what should be the main aim or focus of a youth policy or a youth manifesto?
Of course, I would respond by saying, because I've been involved in a bit of an embarrassing thing to say on television, I was involved in the process, at least the last iteration of policy, acting on the commitment of the minister and stated commitment, I should say, in Parliament that there was going to be a national policy 2 years ago. And I was involved in that process. It was involved in National Steering Committee, that was involved in doing the consultations and getting into the national policy. So I would first say that, to say that I too have a responsibility to be accountable to the youth constituency for us not having a youth policy, right? At least in the last iteration, because effectively I have failed as a part of that team, acting on the promise of a youth policy. I would also say that if there was a youth policy, does that mean actions in favor and for youth? So let's look at youth policy within from two lenses. First, the absence of a youth policy, yes, is an issue from an advocacy standpoint. From an advocacy standpoint, as a young person, if there is a policy that says that this is the vision and this is the framework through which youth development will be pursued, then as a young person, when those things are not happening, you hold that up and you say, listen, this is what you promised, and this is an accountability issue. But what if there is a youth policy and there isn't political commitment and willingness to implement what is in the policy? So I think that the question of the youth policy is not only a question as to what should be the priorities in youth policy, but what type of leadership we have in a society and how leadership views youth, and whether there is a real commitment to youth and a real sense that the young people are participants in shaping the society today, but also inheritors of the society that's being shaped today. And the question that we have to ask ourselves is, where do we see a real sense of commitment? I want to say on the television that, and I started by saying before, and I've never really expressed my political affiliation in any particular way, but I feel the need to do so now to be consistent with what I've been talking about. As you all know, I'm not a member of any political party necessarily. If I were to be part of any political party, it might be the WPA. The WPA is part of the coalition of APNU. I attended two Let's Talk sessions, one with Moses Nagamutu and the other with David Granger. And I listened to David Granger and I heard what he had to say and his posture and his position. And I was convinced for myself at the time that David Granger is the man that I have to work to ensure that my interest and vision is in the society. I have to put my work. That's where I got to go volunteer. So we talk about youth policy, but it is not only the question of whether policy will exist or not, but whether there is political leadership, political will, this sense of encouragement of youth interests within the political discourse. And that, I think, is a larger question. And so for me, what should be some of the priorities for youth policy is that fundamental commitment, because you can change the framework. As young people, different generations of young people will have different ideas of what is important for the young person. 10 years from now, young people will believe that each of them is entitled to one of these fancy devices that James is holding. And I would agree with them that should be a right. It should be a right to have access to information tools and information communication technology. 10 years from now, that's going to happen. Because the speed at which information is changing right now, everything that I knew coming into this session, coming into this very interview, just became old. Yeah. information is changing rapidly. There's a video I don't know the URL for it right now, but there's a video online that there's people make every year. They keep telling you how fast information is changing. And so what should be the priorities? Let the generation decide that. But what should be the commitment? We have to start deciding now.
Awesome. I know James has had some experience in this area with helping to formulate the APNU Youth Manifesto. And James, you can perhaps tell us about some of the things that should be captured in a youth policy and even a more updated youth manifesto. And might I add right there, I think the fact that government has stepped in no meaningful way in the UG strike situation tells us that they don't really have a
lack of
strong
commitment
to youth. And could you
Thank you, Sherrod. Norwell, I must say I'm heartened to hear you say that you're
Very
a volunteer for the David Granger campaign. I want to say that all young people, Norwell has taken a step, and we commend him, we thank him, and we're asking others to follow in his footsteps. On the national youth policy, Norwell struck a very important chord in terms of commitment. And when I drafted the proposal for the first manifesto for APNU concerning youth, it touched on a number of issues. As Norwell said, it has changed. So when I had revisited it a few weeks ago, I realized that we need to do so much more in terms of policy initiatives for young people. And I think APNU, under the leadership of David Granger, has made certain commitments in terms of employment, in terms of entrepreneurship, in terms of empowerment, in terms of education. We went through education at length on our first session, and I wish to mention on the issue of empowerment that we in APNU believe that young people's empowerment in terms of participation, in terms of advocacy, in terms of being part of the table, at the table of the decision-making and processes of this country. We believe that, and we want to ensure that our manifesto and our promise reflects that commitment. So you will not have a situation where the minister, as the Minister Frank Anthony, making an empty promise and years after unfulfilled. These are real initiatives that the APNU would provide. For example, we intend to do something called a mentorship program. We know we have work study, where we give persons the opportunity to work along with in private and public sector. But we need to start a mentorship program that is specific training for young leaders in this country, so that we're not unsure as to in whose hands the country will be after one generation have passed. Brigadier Granger is also committed to a $750,000 soft loan for young people. This means that young people in New University who have a business plan, we want young people to actually be their own employers. It's time we stop thinking of, I want to go work for this person or go work for that person. The APNU believes that we need to empower young people so that they could become employers, so that they could create employment for other young people. And whenever I speak of APNU, I mean APNU and AFC, our brothers and sisters as well. We also believe in ensuring that young people get free financial management training. As you know, young people get money, but they don't know what to do with the money. There's not much avenue. All we could do is probably, as Laura said, probably go to a party on a Friday night and that's it. But we could put those resources, our time, our money, to other things, and we need to have financial training as to how we manage money, how we generate wealth. And those are things that the APNU AFC Coalition would focus on. Also, young people will be eligible for certain tax waivers and concessions. So if you have your own business, you start your own business, you don't have to face high tax penalties and high tax concessions will be granted to you, not for the rich. The rich could pay their concessions, but for young people, we're making special provisions to give young people concessions and tax waivers when they're going to start up their own businesses. So these are some of the things that, the ideas that are out there that APNU AFC is willing to provide for young people to ensure that, as I said, that they're not only creating a society that create, but they're part and parcel of what is going on. So that at the end of the day, Ghana could have a young population that could hold its own in any part of the world. And I think that's how the economy will grow. The reason why I think we're not growing as a country is at the pace we need. We all hear this 9% growth and 5% growth and 7% growth. But young people are not seeing real growth because they're not really empowered. They're not really their own bosses.
All right. We're talking about empowerment. We're talking about our youth. Let's talk about a little bit about the law empowering our youth, about reform. And earlier on we were talking about how do we deal with our young people who are coming out of the prison system. I think there was a question.
Yes. All right. We might have a few youths who probably somewhere along the line, it was in a mishap or something went wrong, and they went into prison, spent 3 years. Some would probably do the CXC program or come out with some form of skill. What do we do with that person when they're out to integrate them back in our society? Because most of the time, you would find young people saying, yes, I had a problem. And when you go to be employed, you would normally hear, this person was incarcerated. How are we able to go out there and say, look, if this was the problem, we're going to take you back into society, if we're going to have a mentorship program, a leadership program, to have these young people back integrated back into our society? Because we can't leave those people out, those youths out.
So we could see that's a very important point. I want to start against the backdrop of the institutions that are supposed to do that. For example, New Opportunity Corps. I think the US is sponsoring the SKY program. But APN had proposed a court education employment program. I think in the first budget speech I made mention of that. A court education employment program. First offenders, young offenders, juvenile offenders. Well, that's just what you said. It targets the young people that made a mistake because of their youth. And but we should not let them fall behind. We've had too many young persons accused of charged, not accused, charged, and in some instances found guilty of murder and of other serious offenses. And what this does is you don't just dump them in the prison and leave them there. You have to give them another shot, a second chance at life. So the court education employment program would cater for those first-time offenders. They will have special training, they will have special teachers, persons to mentor them to build up their character again. So when they come out, once they pass through the program, it does not go as if, as it is, it's a stain on their character, a blemish. It goes to their credit that they did whatever they did in the past, but that's their past. But they've come through a program and are now reformed and prepared to be reintegrated into society. That's the idea of that.
I wanted to add something to, so yes, the rehabilitation of young people who have gone through the prison system. And for years we've talked about the issue of juvenile justice in this country and where we are with juvenile justice. You know, I was going to say something else about that, but I wouldn't say about that. But I want to say something, even before we get to that stage, when we look at the treatment of young people by the state, by law enforcers, even by the court system. And I want to give a specific example, two specific examples, one my own. 3 days ago, the producer of The Real Guyana, I don't want to say show because it's not really a TV show, but if anybody follows Real Guyana, it's mostly online, it's a YouTube channel. And you know, the guy goes around, he takes videos of all kinds of things and so on. His house was invaded by joint services 2 days ago, under the pretext of a search for arms and ammunition. He was home alone, they were armed, he was not. And he was asked to surrender his laptop that had the file of a video taken, and to have that video destroyed, removed, deleted from his system. And then further, he was removed from his home to the home of another police officer because he didn't have internet in his house. And he can go online and remove the video from the online site and to record an apology for having posted the video.
Wow.
This is the state of affairs in our country, that there is a lack of trust in the law because justice is an issue. My own case, I was once parked and a van of police officers surrounded the van I was in front of some friend's house and we were all there talking. And, these big guns, first of all, that's a very traumatic thing to see a gun, and a big gun that is even more traumatic. Maybe sound too many guns in the tongue, right? But it was traumatic. And they wanted me to exit the vehicle to be searched. He said, for what reason? I don't mind submitting to a search. But it's parked vehicle, so it's not a traffic offense. It's not parked in an illegal manner, because it's parked in somebody's bridge. And I'm there at the person's house, so there's no problem with that. So what's the reason for search? They don't want to give any reason, threatening with the guns and so on. And I made a lot of noise, because it was nice and dark. And I figured my only defense, if anything going sour, is to get loud and to alert the people in the neighborhood that something going on down here. Because these were these men surrounding this vehicle and these huge guns. And this is in one of the communities that is supposed to have this social program, the police social program, this sort of community program. What I'm saying is that we have to look at the treatment of people in the country. Look at the treatment of young people. Look at justice. After the incident, I said I should take it further, but then I wrote in the papers. I said, well, let me go find what's the law. And according to the law, sure, you could search my vehicle, but you have to state your probable cause. And if I refuse to search, you can arrest me for having refused to search. You can arrest me. I mean, James, the law, you may say if I'm wrong or right, but you can arrest me for refusing to search, sure enough, because it's your right to search. Well, not the right, but it's you. The law gives you the power to search my vehicle or search my property, whatever. But I can also refuse, because that's also my right. And then you can arrest me for refusing. That's also allowed under the law. And then it becomes a court matter. Then the court now decide that there was enough reason for you to submit to a search. And then the court might look harshly on the fact that I refuse and give me some fines and time. But that should be a society that functions, That should be the way it should happen in a society that functions. But the abuse and treatment of people and of young people, I think, is also an issue within the society. So even before we get to juvenile justice, and when we look at Dentalgate, which is all over Facebook now, and you ask a young person to say, well, listen, I can live in a society where if bigwigs can get all kind of privileges, such a superficial society, an insensitive society, then, this thing about law and order, I'm not worried with this thing about law and order. Law and order is not important. It's about what I could get. It's about, if I could deal with this person and get some money, if I could sell this, if I could steal that.
It's about the hustle.
It's about the hustle. It's a hustling society because leaders are hustling. There's hustle from the top.
Yeah.
So there's hustle from the top, and the police hustling, the law enforcement hustling, everybody hustling, then the young person hustling. And then the law put it in against it.
Let's take a break, and when we come back, I want to talk to the larger issue of leadership, and we're going to be presented with 2 slates, perhaps more, and the populace is going to have some stark choices, and we're going to ask the question: what should young people be looking for in the next leadership who will be taking charge in our country? And I wanted to gauge all of our panelists. What should young people be looking for? Stay tuned, we'll be right back with In Our Time.
I am excited about the future for my country. I'm happy to see that we can set aside our differences, set aside the past, and work together for a better Guyana. Let's move forward together. I am excited about the future for my country.
Vote APNU AFC.
This is our time.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to In Our Time. We're talking all things youth and all things election 2015. And at this point of our discussion, we want to talk about leadership. Young people are going to be going to the polling station in numbers, first-time voters in numbers. What should we be looking at in our next cadre of leaders? What qualities? What features? What? Anybody can jump in.
Well, I could jump off.
Go ahead.
That could be a bad word. But I think that it is important, and we started the discussion already around what what this election is about. This election is about the society you want to see, the future that you want to see. And I think that as a starting point, what should young people be looking for? I don't like the idea of telling young people they should be looking for. But what I would say is that myself, I am interested in a society where there isn't pushback against my expression, my free democratic expression of my interests. I'm interested in a kind of society where I can see that commitments are made and they're fulfilled. And when they fail to be fulfilled, there are consequences. I would like to see the kind of society where young people work in partnership with not so young people, and that we are together working towards a society that is founded on principles of justice and democracy and participation. And the qualities that I would look for as a young person, if I want a society like that, is the track record. What has been the track record of the leaders? Because the only way to really judge is by what you do. And everybody will come with rhetoric. And I stated earlier that I had to examine myself, the record of Mr. Granger. I had to go, look, and I do it for everybody. Even people that are not political leaders. You know, you're involved in a process. What do you stand for? Because what you stand for is not only what you say, it's also what you do. You know? And then if you look at the political campaign of 2011, the real thing that was thrown at Mr. Granger was this blood on his hands business. And I liked his response. You know, he said, "Look at my hands here. There's no blood here." And I think that people are going to dig and they're going to try to find what they didn't find. What we found was an honorable man who has had a track record of discipline, a track record of integrity and honesty. And I expected that to be carried forward. And I would look for, in the leadership, qualities that match action, that match words, that I can relate to commitments.
What I'm looking for in a leader is someone who is vocal out there, will represent youths and others. For example, we have, well, there is a new prime ministerial candidate that the PPC has, and she is a woman. We have never heard her. Well, the first time that I saw her was when there was this actual launch that she will be the prime ministerial candidate. But before that, I knew nothing about her, and I'm still waiting to hear her speak.
Congrats to Mrs. Harper, but I want to know what her voice sounds like. I just want to
Yeah, at least you will need somebody. We need representation.
meaningful
We-
representation,
of
not just
course.
tokenism, but
Yes.
meaningful representation.
And not just a face there, trying to represent us. We want somebody who can, come up with substantial ideas, suggestions, not just be there and stifle others. Because we do have women who are leaders, and to me, they do not represent us how we want to be represented. So, I can probably charge her to let us hear her, to see what she stands for, and, see how well women will be represented. That's all.
Well, I could say if they treat her as how the Prime Minister Samuel Hines was treated, I think women should refuse to vote for the People's Progressive Party Civic, because no real power was afforded in terms of changing the dynamics of this country was afforded Prime Minister Samuel Hines, and apparently they've taken a more backward step. You're putting a woman out there, and for a person who grew up in a household of women who love seeing women in positions of power and positions of influence, seeing a woman of substance, an intelligent woman, a dedicated public servant. I remember my mom has been something similar to that, serving the public service for over 30-something, 40 years, giving her life to Guyana. And then she's selected for one of the highest offices of the land, and sitting between the the president and Mr. Minister Rowe here, I remember scripture when I see that of a certain savior standing, being crucified. But I'll go there. But the thing is, having a woman of substance there and not allowing her to advocate on behalf of women, I think women should come out resoundingly and speak against it. You know.
Of course, you don't want her to be mum, at least she must be able to say something.
Yes.
Something that is meaningful too, not
A
just
platform,
there.
you know, so what she intended to change in terms of how the People's Progressive Party have been treating women and women folk in this country. The trafficking persons greatly affects women. Something the PEP Civic, they've turned a deaf and dumb and blind sentence to it. Suicide, domestic abuse. We have a former president who is guilty of domestic abuse against his wife. So we know the people have a culture of not advocating for women's issues, and here again they're muzzling and stifling one of the most brightest, strong public servant who happens to be a woman in our society.
I want to give Essie a chance.
Sorry, Essie,
Yeah,
for the-
I'm not pull a harbour.
Oh, there we won't put a hard one.
Right ahead.
All right. As a young woman, I'm looking for somebody to guide me with leadership skills. Also, the first program that we had, I look to Mr. Granger as a humane person. The reason I'm saying this is because he's out there for the people, not only the adults, but the youths. And more so, this is our time for our young Guyanese to come out and advocate for something that is worthwhile. This is our time to shape this nation. And it's not about race. We want everybody to come out. Let's vote change. And not just, because it's PPP, we're Indian, we're going to vote for that. No, let's sit down, take time and think about what are we doing, what is affecting us as young people. For me, I have a serious problem with domestic violence. In today's papers, we have an 8-year-old girl who was raped by her uncle. Come on, what are we doing? We're just gonna sit down and accept everything that is coming to us and not do anything as women. We have I think every week we read the papers or open the papers. Some woman was murdered. We had some suicide case. Exactly.
Yes.
Come on, what are we gonna do as young people? We need a change, and this is our time to shape and mold this nation, and we're gonna look to Mr. Granger to do that for us. That's my view.
Personally, I'm looking for humility in a leader. There was a video making the rounds on social media recently where they were interviewing President Jagan very early in his tenure. And he said he was looking for a lean and clean government.
Yes.
And he said he was against extravagance.
Yes.
And I want to hazard that Chedi Jagan would not vote for the PPP this year.
That is
on his own standard.
Yes.
He said he was going after ministers who had exorbitant salaries, who had exorbitant bonuses, who were living extravagantly. That word was used,
$2 million
extravagant living. And we come back to Teeth-gate, Dental Gate,
Colgate.
So I want to hazard that he would not have voted for the party that he founded this very year. And so looking at a man like Chedi Jagan, who had his faults, but who was humble. If you go to see where he lived,
Yes.
he was a humble guy. I look for a man who is humble, who that power of the presidency isn't going to get to his head and get his head very easily. So that's what I'm looking for personally. But Norwell, we were talking early on before we started the broadcast of what we thought might have been missing from the political dynamics presently. Are we hitting all of the high notes? Are we hitting the notes period? Are we touching all of the bases? Is anything missing?
That's a tough one. I don't know that I have the skill to analyze that. What I would say, again, I like to bring it all around to the personal, what am I sensing as an individual and what am I feeling? One, I would say that that the deep change that I think we seek as a society is still a promise to us. as a society, and I think that ideally is where we need to be. That is going towards the core issue of who we are as a people and the type of leadership, the type of discourse that goes to that. I look at Mr. Granger as someone who, I first met Mr. Granger when again I was supporting Mr. James Bond. When the PNC had launched its process for the primary process for its candidate. That's when I first
Thanks for your support, man.
yeah, that's when I first encountered Mr. Granger, at least in the political sense, outside of his work with the review. And my only question to him then, when there was the opportunity to pose questions on the floor, was whether he thought that a Truth and Reconciliation Commission was necessary, and whether he would pursue that. My second opportunity to engage him in questions was recently at the Let's Talk event where he spoke to young people, and I asked the same question, if he thought that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was necessary and whether he intended to pursue it. And Mr. Granger's response to that question was not necessarily a yes or no on a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, but a definite yes on the principle of truth and reconciliation. The idea that it is the responsibility of the leadership to engineer, I want to use that word deliberately, engineer within a society this opportunity for conversations and a discourse that allows us to seek truth and to reconcile as a society. Because it's through that process when people can come with their narratives of truth in a space that is open and that is honest and that is nonviolent, that we can begin to talk about that deep fundamental change. So what's missing? I don't know, maybe not much. Because, as I'm saying, I found that there is a potential for that. And I used the term before, my interest is in voting for a leader who will not push back against that discourse, who would not find it necessary to be violently opposed to the very notion of conversation.
Awesome.
I wish to point out, here in our speak of truth and reconciliation, that coming out of the Commingsburg Accord, signed on Valentine's Day, in which APNU and AFC came together, they have agreed to a 10-point plan. And it goes, if I could list the 10 points: constitutional reform, economic development, financial legislation, local democracy, national unity. I want to read that specifically. They've agreed that they will introduce a program for healing, reconciliation, and social integration. So I think we've gone a step further into identifying that we will pursue your words. We will pursue healing and reconciliation. I want to say this: the idea of the coalition is to remove a major division amongst our peoples, our politics. We've always allowed politics to divide us, always. And the coming together of two major political parties have sought to break down at least one barrier, the division of politics. Come after May 11th, if Guyanese vote wholeheartedly for the partnership, it will show that we've broken down another, which is race. So this partnership hinges on the breaking down of barriers. I think two major barriers, politics and race. And I think once we've gotten rid of those barriers, Guyana will transform. And the other is taxation reform. Telecommunications information is very important. You mentioned ICT. We're still at 3G or 2G or 2.5G.
Very slow.
Public security, which you mentioned, SC. Public services. The reorganization of the education, health, sports, recreation, other human service sectors, and of course the youth program. Those are the 10 points that we will pursue aggressively. Let me use that word. Pursue aggressively to ensure that Guyanese indeed get a better life.
Awesome. Guys, as we wrap up, any closing thoughts?
I like hearing the young lady speak, but I like hearing the young lady speak.
Young lady.
I like
Well,
it.
first
Don't
of
pull her.
all, I would say we need somebody who will put our country and the people first and not themselves. I long for that moment. I can see it and I know that it will be like that with the APNU and AFC coalition.
I believe that too.
Well, I think I will have a, my biggest problem is when it comes to election. My mom is Negro and my dad is Indian. So at the end of the day, where do I go?
At home.
You know, because
To polling booth. I say that.
the thing is, when election time comes around, you always find this racial thing going on. Oh, use a nigger or use a coolie, whatever. We need to stop.
Yeah.
We want people, one nation, one destiny. And if we're going to move forward, I think APNU/AFC, that's the way forward. We're going to break down those barriers, as James said, and we would like to see more young people coming out, especially the women, coming out and doing what is right.
I'm tempted to say amen, Jay.
Yeah.
Say amen.
I want to say, coming out of the MASH celebrations, we had a fantastic day on the road MASH. I was the DJ, and I saw Kevin Dramjatan, David Granger, Basil Williams, Valerie Garrido, Kathy Hughes, Joe Harmon, and Mr. Patterson, David Patterson, other AFC persons, APNU persons, MASH,
family.
walking together along the streets of Guyana. And the response of young people of all races, people were rushing to them to take out pictures with David and Kamraj. When we entered the national park, the entire park erupted for at least 10 or 15 continuous minutes. Persons there said they have never, ever, ever, ever witnessed something like that. And it shows Guyana is ready for unity. And I want to believe that, I want to say to viewers, Team Unity is ready to take the reins of government and ensure that we have a government that cares for you.
And we need the same energy and enthusiasm.
Well, you'll have the energy.
May
Once DJ Bond is there,
Yes.
once DJ Bond is we'll get them up.
Any closing thoughts, sir?
Yeah, and I would say too that young people are already there. I think we are there already because we begin to think about that society, and we're seeing other things. I remember when I was in high school, looking up this word government and what it means, and I learned that it came from the Latin, which means rudder, as in the rudder of the ship. All right. My closing words would be that this is the time for choosing. The time for choosing if you're going to stay on the ship. Because I have a friend that wrote a poem, and she ends the poem by says, "We're still on the ship. We're still on the ship. We're on the stinking, sinking ship." And then the next line, "We're still on the ship. We're still on the ship. We're on the stinking, sinking," and she replaces the P. And I think it's a time for choosing where we want to be. If we're going to be in that ship, or
Drop the P.
and I think that the young people are ready to make that decision. But I just want to say, finally, that it's not only the words and the wishes that win elections, it's the vote.
Yep.
So you have to go out, you have to vote.
Get up and vote.
You have to vote.
And help others.
Pick up your ID card.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us in our time. We hope we've given you enough food for thought. Thank you, Nessa. Thank you, James. Thank you, Essie. Thank you, our very special guest, Norwell. Next week, we're going to be having two very special people. James, can I tell them?
Tell them. You can tell
We're
them.
going to be having lawyer extraordinaire Nigel Hughes, and we're going to be having his very, very charming wife and member of parliament, Kathy Hughes, and that is a woman who speaks her mind. So, see you guys next week. Thank you for joining us, and take very good care of yourself and of your families as well. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Tell them